Hey everyone, it's Diane, the American behind the Living Abroad lifestyle blog, Oui In France. Welcome back to my YouTube channel where we talk about everyday French life and beyond. Today I have a language learning video for you where I'm sharing my top 5 tips for how to make your French sound more natural, so keep on watching. As language learners, the truest thing I could tell you is that learning a language is not easy. But once you get to a certain point, you want to smooth out your language skills, make them more fluid, sound a little bit more like a native speaker. So that's what I'm covering in today's video. And just so you know, I'm not a language teacher of any sort, so all my tips are anecdotal. They're just based on my experiences from living in France. Let's go. Number 1, drop the ne in negative sentences. In French, when you're constructing a negative sentence, you'd put the words ne and pas to negate it. Those two words would go around the verb. It's the English equivalent of saying not. So, I don't have a dog is je n'ai pas de chien. And if you're writing French, you always need to write the ne and the pas for it to be correct. But if you're saying this sentence to someone in regular conversation, you could drop the ne part. So instead of je n'ai pas de chien, you could just say j'ai pas de chien. And it's totally fine. It's kind of the equivalent in English of saying, I'm going to go to the store instead of I'm going to go to the store. And so it's totally fine to do. You could drop the ne every time you negate a sentence in French in casual speech, and you'll sound much more natural. So just forget what you learned in school for this one. Number 2, condense the words. So we do this in English all the time when we speak. Do not becomes don't, should not, shouldn't, and then we kind of get informal and say things like gonna, gotta, don't ya, won't ya, shoulda, coulda, in fast speech. So no, it's not 100% correct English if you're gonna write gonna and gotta, but when we speak quickly, the words contract, they condense. It's the same thing in French. So if you're gonna say you have, tu as, you would always write tu as, but when you're speaking, tu as can become ta, tu es can become te. So it's just a contraction of the subject and verb, like we would do in English. And like my poor French husband, in 2009, when he was still getting acquainted with English, he sounded like a robot, always saying, would you like to go to the store? Instead of would you like to go to the store? So in French, sometimes words contract as well. Again, je ne sais pas, I don't know, kind of becomes je sais pas in speech. And there are a bunch of others, so just remember that sometimes in French, the most natural way to speak does include those contractions. Number 3, use the word on instead of nous when you mean we. So on is the third person singular pronoun that you commonly learn in school with il, elle, and on. It means one does something, but it can also mean we. So in school, formal French, we're taught that nous means we, and it does. You're not going to get into any trouble saying, nous allons au supermarché, we're going to the store. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with saying, on va au supermarché. So when you hear the president on TV, he's going to say, nous allons quelque part, we go somewhere. But when we speak to each other and you want to say we, opt for the on. Number 4, add in some strange French sounds. So if you spend any time in France, you've definitely heard these noises. I've actually written a whole post with audio on these French noises that I'll link below in the description box. It's a huge hit and is still, to this day, 6 years later, one of the most popular posts on my blog, so go have a listen. But what do I mean by French noises? Well, things like oh. They sound kind of weird, right? But I promise, I explain them all in the blog post. And don't go overboard, but drop in 1 or 2 where it's natural in conversation. If you use too many, you do risk sounding ridiculous, but I promise you, French people do use all of these strange sounds and you'll fit right in. Number 5, work on your pronunciation. Okay, so before I get into this one, I want to talk about having an accent real quick. Let me be very clear. To have an accent in a foreign language is a great thing. There is nothing wrong with having an accent. It's not a defect. It's not something to improve upon. But that said, the only issue with accents is when they affect comprehension. It's kind of awkward for both the person speaking with the accent and the person on the receiving end to not really understand what's going on. If an accent stands in the way of comprehension, it is something that we can improve upon. So in the effort of speaking more clearly and to make sure you're understood, I do think there's value in working on an accent. Not to reduce it, not to sound like everyone else, but just to be understood. Okay? So with this tip, work on pronunciation, there are two parts. Number one is to work on vowel sounds. I've done a whole video on the difference between the U and the word tu, and then the OU sound that's in the words nous or vous in French. U versus ou. And it's very subtle, but these are different sounds. So consider I saw you with the formal vous. Je vous ai vu. It's very subtle, but they are two different U sounds. U versus U. And vowel sounds are also something to watch out for in words like concert versus cancer, concert versus concert, or asshole versus duck, connard versus canard. So the on versus the on in that case. Work on your vowel sounds, differentiate between them, and you'll be one step ahead of the game. The second part of this tip, working on pronunciation, has to do with the endings of words in French. So in English, there's a lot of y and w, no, I go, I'm emphasizing it for effect. There's a lot of movement to the mouth. In French, there's a lot of words that just need to be clipped. So let me speak with a really heavy American accent. I'm going to say I'm going to go. Je vais aller. But in French, you're not saying je vais aller. That's a huge accent. You'll most likely be understood, but the word is je vais aller. Vais, not veille, and aller, not aller. You hear the difference? So clip the words, do your best to imitate native speakers, and most of all, practice. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something. Please let me know below down in the comments what you'd like to see next, and of course, don't forget to subscribe. Salut!